Hey everyone, welcome to Noise Harmony channel and welcome to the very first episode of our Helix Stadium beginner series. If you're new here, my name is Rafał. I'm a professional sound designer and for a long time I've been creating guitar tones and presets for Line 6 gear, Helix devices like STOMP, Go, and now also Helix Stadium. You can find and hear my work on noiseharmony.com. I'm also an active guitar and bass player. I've been playing in bands for years, and in my current band we all use Line 6 gear, even the drummer. So everything I show on this channel comes from real-world use. Helix Stadium is a very powerful unit, and at first glance it can feel overwhelming. There's a big touchscreen, a lot of routing options, new concepts, and a different workflow compared to older Helix devices. But the good news is, once you understand how it's laid out and how navigation works, it's actually one of the most beginner-friendly Helix units Line 6 has ever released. In this first episode, we're not building tones yet. Instead, we're focusing on orientation. I'll show you how Helix Stadium is structured, how to move around the interface, what the main views are, and how to think about navigation so you don't feel lost every time you turn it on. If you've just unboxed your Helix Stadium or Helix Stadium XL, this episode will give you a solid mental map of the device. I'm on Stadium XL, but if you own Helix Stadium, don't worry, they are really similar. Throughout this 10-episode series, we'll cover everything you need to know: hardware and navigation, presets and setlists, blocks and signal flow, building your first tones, Footswitches and controllers, snapshots, advanced routing, song view and automation, command center integration and global settings. If you've got some experience and know your way around the unit already, feel free to skip ahead to find exactly what you're looking for. Let's start with the hardware itself. At the top, the most obvious element is the large touchscreen. This is where most of your interaction happens: building signal chains, moving blocks, editing parameters, and navigating between views. Unlike older Helix units, you're not limited to knobs and buttons. Drag and drop and touch gestures are a core part of the workflow. Below the screen, you'll find the physical controls. They're complementary. The knobs below the screen are context-sensitive and change their function depending on what you're editing. The Footswitches are fully assignable. If you're brand new to Helix, don't worry about the details yet. We'll cover Footswitch logic in a dedicated episode later in the series. For now, just know that they'll let you change sounds and control your effects as you play. On the left side of the touchscreen, there is a large volume knob that controls the main level for three outputs: quarter-inch, XLR, and headphones. Pressing any of these output buttons opens the matrix, where you can precisely adjust the mix for each output independently. This is useful when you need different volume balances, for example sending a louder signal to the PA while keeping your stage monitors at a lower level, or adjusting headphone volume separately during practice. Below the volume knob, you'll find the transport controls. This will be covered in episode 7, as they are used in the song view. On the right side of the touchscreen, you'll find several controls. Let's start with the buttons. The home button lets you quickly jump to the home view, where you can see the current preset signal flow. More on that in the moment. To the right of the knob, there's a note icon that takes you to the song view. This is where you can use Showcase, Line 6's built-in system for playing along with backing tracks, mainly for practice or even live performance with pre-recorded material. You can control playback, set up flags and markers, and sync your sound changes with the music. As I've said, we'll dive deeper into this in episode 7. Below that, you'll find the amp icon, which lets you jump directly to the amp settings within the current preset. In the center is the save icon, allowing you to quickly save the preset, and on the right is the XY button, which takes you to the XY control screen. It can be mapped with different effect parameters, so it's possible to control them directly on the touchscreen. Under these, there are buttons that let you jump between parameter pages within a block. Look, can you see this red line? It means that we're on the first parameter page, and with these buttons we can quickly jump between the pages. You can also just use the touchscreen and simply swipe with your finger to see the next page. Turning the top right knob lets you change presets. And if you press it, you'll jump straight into your preset list. You can also simply press the preset name on the touchscreen to go there. And don't worry, I'll explain presets, setlists and templates in detail in the next episode of this series. The bottom right function changes depending on the view you're in. In the home view, turning it changes the current effect block, and if you press it, you'll jump to the effects list. You can also do this from the touchscreen. Just press the effect block name to go straight to the effects list. On the rear panel, you have all your inputs and outputs. Guitar inputs, line inputs, sends and returns for external pedals, XLR outputs, USB audio, MIDI and expansion options. We're not diving deep into inputs and outputs today. That will come later. But for now, it's important to understand that Stadium is built to handle very complex setups. For this episode, the most important thing to remember is this. Almost everything you do on Helix Stadium starts and ends with the touchscreen. When you power on your Helix Stadium, you'll land in what we can call the home view. This is where you see your current preset and its signal flow. Think of this screen as a horizontal map of your sound. Your guitar signal enters from the left, flows through the blocks in the middle, and exits on the right. Each block represents something happening to your sound: an amp, a cab, an effect, a split, or a utility block. You can tap any block to select it. You can drag blocks to move them. You can clear them, bypass them, or assign them to a foot switch. This left-to-right flow is one of the most important concepts to understand because it reflects how audio actually moves through the unit. If you ever feel lost later in more advanced presets, coming back to this simple left-to-right thinking will save you a lot of frustration. Let's talk about how you actually move around. Tapping selects things. Dragging moves them. Swiping left or right moves between pages or views, depending on context. In the song view, you can pinch and zoom in on a section of your track. When you tap a block, the bottom part of the screen changes to show parameters related to that block. This is where the physical knobs below the screen come into play. They are mapped to the parameters you see, so you can either touch the screen or use the knobs, whichever feels more natural. One important thing to understand early on is that Helix Stadium is not trying to force you into one control method. You can work fully on the touchscreen, fully with the knobs, or with a mix of both. Over time, you'll naturally develop your own workflow. You'll notice that many blocks offer more than one way to edit them. There's a quick simplified view designed to get you into the right tonal ballpark fast. And there are deeper parameter pages for fine-tuning. This is intentional. Helix Stadium is designed so that beginners don't have to understand everything on day one. With the focus view, you can start with broad tonal decisions, quickly check some tone and effect variations, and gradually learn more advanced parameters as you go. Helix Stadium also offers a desktop application that connects wirelessly over Wi-Fi. This allows you to edit presets on a larger screen using a mouse and keyboard, without crouching over the hardware. This app is not required to use the unit, but for many users it's a huge quality of life improvement, especially if you're doing longer sound design sessions. The desktop app can make the process faster and more comfortable. You can download the app for free from the Line 6 website. I'll put a link in the description below if you're interested. Throughout this series, however, almost everything I show will be done directly on the unit. And that's it for episode 1. At this point, you should have a clear understanding of how Helix Stadium is laid out, how to navigate the interface, and how to think about the signal flow and interaction with the device. You don't need to remember every detail. The goal here was orientation, not mastery. In the next episode, we'll move on to presets, setlists, and templates. I'll explain how Helix Stadium organizes sounds internally, why setlists are more powerful than simple folders, and how to avoid chaos as your preset library grows. If you want to follow this series step by step, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next episode. And if you're curious to hear what Helix Stadium is capable of right now, using fully built mix-ready presets designed for real playing situations, you can check out my work at noiseharmony.com. This is episode 2 of our Helix Stadium beginner series. If you're new here, my name is Rafał. I'm a professional sound designer, and for a long time I've been creating guitar tones and presets for Line 6 gear. You can find and hear my work on noiseharmony.com. In the previous episode, we focused on orientation. We looked at the hardware, the touchscreen, basic navigation, and how signal flow works inside Helix Stadium. The goal there was simple: to make sure you're not lost every time you turn the unit on. Today, we're taking the next step. Before we build any tones or start tweaking amps, we need to understand how Helix Stadium organizes sounds internally. This is one of the most important concepts in the entire system, and it's also where you can get a little confused, especially if you come from a previous generation Helix device. In this episode, I'll explain what presets really are in Helix Stadium, how setlists work, what templates are meant for, and how all of this fits together into a workflow that actually makes sense, especially if you play multiple bands or live sets. Once you understand this, everything else in Helix Stadium becomes much easier and more predictable. Let's start with the most basic building block, the preset. In Helix Stadium, a preset is a complete description of your sound. It includes the basics: your signal chain, all blocks inside it, their order, and all parameter values. But it also stores many advanced elements like snapshots, controller assignments, routing, and output configuration, which you'll learn about throughout this series. In other words, when you load a preset, you're loading an entire virtual rig. This is important to understand early on. A preset is not just an amp setting, and it's not just a pedal board. It's the full picture of how your sound is built from input to output. When you select a preset, everything on the screen reflects exactly what the preset contains. There is no hidden layer and no separate edit mode. What you see is what you're editing. Inside Helix Stadium, presets are divided into two main categories: factory presets and user presets. Factory presets are provided by Line 6. They are designed to showcase what the unit can do, demonstrate different amps and effects, and give you inspiration. You can load them, play them, analyze them, and learn from them, but you can't override them. However, if you find a factory preset you like and want to modify it, you can easily create your own editable copy. Just select any factory preset and double-tap the Save button on the hardware. This does a quick Save as New. And a fully editable copy is created in the next available location within your User Presets folder. User Presets are your personal sound library. This is where all your own presets live, and this is where you will be saving everything you build throughout this series. The distinction between factory and user preset folders is important, because it protects the factory content while giving you full freedom in your own preset space. Now let's talk about setlists, because this is where Helix Stadium introduces a very powerful concept that didn't exist in the exact form before. At first glance, setlists may look like simple folders that contain presets, but that's not what they are. A setlist is more like a playlist or a reference list. Instead of storing copies of presets, a setlist points to the preset stored in your user preset database. This means you can use the same preset in multiple setlists at the same time. For example, you might have one core clean tone that you use in several different bands or projects. Instead of duplicating that preset over and over again, you can reference it in different setlists. Here is the key advantage. When you update that preset, it updates everywhere it's used. So if you improve your clean tone, fix an EQ issue, or adjust output level, you don't have to remember to update 5 different copies. The change propagates automatically. This keeps your sound library clean, consistent, and much easier to maintain over time. Look at this example. Let's say that my band plays 2 different show variants: the Friday night special and the Saturday destruction event. By moving to Manage Presets on the right, I can fill my setlists with presets in different order. So you can see, as I jump between my setlists, that they are using presets from my user preset database. And as I said, if I choose to adjust any of my presets, it will be updated in all of my setlists instantly. Helix Stadium allows up to 122 setlists, with each setlist holding up to 128 presets. The best way to think about setlists is in terms of context. You might have setlists for specific shows, different bands, or for practice. Each setlist can present presets in a different order, even if they reference the same underlying sounds. This becomes extremely powerful in live situations. You can organize presets in the exact order of your set, without duplicating anything and without worrying about any inconsistencies between the presets that were supposed to sound the same. Once you get used to this way of thinking, going back to the traditional folder-based system feels very limiting. Now let's talk about templates. A template is not a preset you play, it's a starting point. To access your templates, tap the main menu icon, then tap New Preset. The template list will appear, showing all available starting points. Templates are designed to give you a structured foundation when building new presets. Instead of starting from an empty signal chain every time, you can start from a layout that already makes sense. Let's say you find yourself repeatedly coming back to a particular combination of amp, cap, compressor, and the distortion pedal. You might consider saving these settings as a template and avoid always choosing the same blocks. Or maybe you like a particular routing setup with your guitar on one processing line and vocals run through the second processing line. Save this setup as a template and save your time. This encourages consistency in your workflow. It also reduces decision fatigue, because you're not reinventing the same structure every time you want to build a new sound. Templates are especially useful when you start building multiple presets for the same project. You can save your routing settings as a template to create new presets much quicker. Another important thing to understand is that Helix Stadium encourages non-destructive workflows. You can duplicate presets, create new versions, and experiment freely without breaking anything. If something doesn't work, you can always revert or move on. You can also simply undo wrong moves. If an action is irreversible, Stadium will display a warning beforehand. This mindset is important. You're not supposed to get everything right on your first try. Helix Stadium is designed to support experimentation without punishment. At this stage, one of the most common beginner mistakes is treating every preset as a completely isolated thing. Instead, think in terms of reusable building blocks, core tones that you refine over time, setlists that organize those tones for specific purposes, templates that help you build consistently. You found an amazing routing that works for you? Save it as a template. Do you like a particular reverb or amp settings? Save it to favorites. To do this, just touch the block you want to save, and from the drop-down menu, select Add to Favorites. Blocks can also be organized in folders. Confirm with the Add New button, and you're done. From that point on, you'll have that block available in your favorites, and you can quickly add it to any chain you're building. Once you adopt this mindset, Helix Stadium starts to feel much less chaotic and much more intentional. That's it for episode 2. You now understand how Helix Stadium organizes sounds internally, what presets really are, how setlists work, and why templates exist. This knowledge might not make sound yet, but it will save you an enormous amount of time and frustration later. In the next episode, we'll look at blocks, amps, cabs, and effects. Not to tweak them deeply yet, but to understand what kinds of building blocks are available and how they behave. If you want to follow this series step by step, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss episode 3. And if you're curious to hear how all of these concepts translate into real playable tones, you can check out my preset work on noiseharmony.com. This is episode 3 of our Helix Stadium Beginner series. If you're new here, my name is Rafał. I'm a professional sound designer, and for a long time I've been creating guitar tones and presets for Line 6 gear. You can find and hear my work on noiseharmony.com. In the previous episode, we talked about presets, setlists, and templates, and how Helix Stadium organizes sounds internally. That episode was all about structure and workflow, understanding where things live and how they're connected. Today, we're finally stepping into the core building blocks of sound creation inside Helix Stadium. We're going to talk about blocks, what they are, how they work, what kinds of blocks are available, and how to think about amps, cabs, effects in a way that makes sense from the very beginning. This episode is not about dialing in tones yet. We're not chasing the perfect sound today. The goal here is understanding the possibilities. Once you understand what blocks do and how they interact, building presets become logical instead of frustrating. In Helix Stadium, everything that happens to your sound is represented by a block. A block is a processing stage in your signal chain. It can be an amp, a cabinet, an effect, a utility function, or a routing element like a split or merge. Each block does one specific job, and your overall sound is created by chaining these blocks together from left to right. If you remember the signal flow we talked about in episode 1, blocks are the individual steps along that path. Your guitar enters the system, passes through blocks one by one, and then exits the unit. Helix Stadium offers 48 block locations total across 4 paths: Path 1A, 1B, 2A, and 2B, giving you significantly more flexibility than previous Helix units. Each path offers 12 block locations for a total of 48 block capacity. This is separate from DSP limits. Even if you have empty slots available, you might still run out of processing power if you're using multiple DSP-heavy blocks like amps and reverbs. I'll discuss it more in depth later in this episode. One more practical thing to know: blocks can be copied, pasted, and erased just like you'd expect. Tap a selected block to access these options. This makes it easy to duplicate settings, move blocks between presets, or quickly clear a slot you no longer need. Helix Stadium includes several categories of blocks, each serving a different purpose. Amp blocks model the behavior of real guitar and bass amplifiers. They shape the core character of your tone and respond dynamically to how you play, meaning they react to your touch dynamics, sustain, and the organic feel of your playing, just like a real amp would. Cab blocks simulate speaker cabinets and microphones. They are just as important as the amp itself and have a huge impact on your tone. Helix Stadium helps you by automatically pairing an amp with a suitable cab. This is a great starting point, especially if you're new. Later on, you'll develop preferences for specific combinations, microphones, or impulse responses, which are the sonic measurements of speaker cabinets captured as a short audio files. We'll cover these in detail later. But in the beginning, trusting these defaults is a smart move. If you want to, you can disable this behavior when choosing an amp. On the right side, you've got an Add Cab block switch. Next, we have effect blocks, which include everything from drives, equalizers, compressors, delays, reverbs, modulation effects like chorus, flanger, phaser, and tremolo. pitch effects, and more. These blocks shape, enhance, and animate your sound. Volume and pan blocks handle tasks like adjusting gain levels, panning, and stereo imaging, helping manage your signal rather than color it creatively. Beyond these main categories, you'll also encounter input blocks, output blocks, FX loop blocks for integrating external gear, and the looper block for layering parts in real time. Don't worry about memorizing all of these now. You'll become familiar with them as you build presets. Finally, there are routing blocks like splits and merges, which allow your signal to branch out, run in parallel paths, and then recombine later. You don't need to master all of this immediately. What matters now is understanding that every sound in Helix Stadium is built by combining these blocks intentionally. Effects in Helix Stadium behave much like real pedals and studio processors. Where you place an effect in the signal chain matters. A drive before an amp will behave differently than a drive after an amp. A delay before distortion will sound very different from a delay after distortion. There are no absolute rules, but there are common conventions. Helix Stadium makes it very easy to experiment by dragging blocks around and immediately hearing the results. This is one of the strengths of the platform. You're encouraged to try ideas, listen critically, and decide what works for your playing style. Using a physical pedal board, you'd need to replug a lot of cables to test these kinds of different setups. Another important concept is mono versus stereo processing. If the signal is mono, both left and right channels will play exactly the same signal. And with the stereo processing, these signals differ, creating the stereo effect. Most effect blocks in Helix Stadium are available in both mono and stereo versions. When browsing the model list, you'll see these versions organized in the sidebar. The mono version uses less processing power and is ideal before your amp, while the stereo version creates with and is typically used after your amp and cab. Note that stereo version of an effect model will use approximately twice as much processing power as the mono version of the same model. This matters a lot depending on how you monitor your sound. If you play through a single guitar cabinet or a mono PA feed, your stereo effects will collapse to mono. If you use in-ear monitors, headphones or a stereo PA, stereo effects can dramatically increase width and depth. It's also important to remember that placing a mono block after a stereo block will collapse the signal back to mono. This isn't a bug, it's simply how signal flow works. Understanding this early will prevent a lot of confusion later when building more complex presets. Now let's talk about DSP, which stands for Digital Signal Processing. DSP is simply the processing power available to run blocks. Every block uses some amount of DSP, and more complex blocks use more than simpler ones. For example, amp and reverb blocks are DSP intensive, while simple EQ or volume blocks use very little processing power. Helix Stadium has significantly more DSP headroom than previous Helix units, but it's still a finite resource. At some point, if you add too many heavy blocks, the unit will tell you that no more processing is available. It will be simply impossible to add the next block to your chain. The important thing to understand is that this is not something you need to constantly worry about as a beginner. Helix Stadium was designed to allow very complex presets, and most typical signal chains won't hit limits easily. Later in the series, we'll talk about routing across paths and optimizing DSP usage. For now, just remember that some DSP limits exist. If you want to dive deeper into DSP management, check out our Helix hacking video. I'll put a link in the description. A useful habit to develop early is asking yourself why a block is there. Is this block shaping tone? Is it controlling dynamics? Is it adding space? Is it solving a problem? If you can't answer that question, and more importantly, if you can't hear the improvement, the block might not be necessary. Once you tweak a new block to your liking, bypass it for a moment and decide if it's improving your sound or not. This mindset leads to clearer presets, easier troubleshooting, and better sounding results. That's it for episode 3. You now have a solid understanding of the building blocks that make up every preset in Helix Stadium. This knowledge is the foundation for everything that follows. In the next episode, we'll finally put all of this together and build your first full preset from scratch. We'll take it step by step, explain every decision, and focus on creating a playable, dynamic guitar tone without overcomplicating things. If you want to follow along, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss episode 4. And if you're curious how these concepts translate into finished mixed-ready tones, you can check out my preset work on noiseharmony.com. This is episode 4 of our Helix Stadium Beginner series. If you're new here, my name is Rafa. I'm a professional sound designer, and for a long time I've been creating guitar tones and presets for Line 6 gear. You can find and hear my work on noiseharmony.com. Fully built, mix-ready presets designed for real playing situations. In the previous episodes of this series, we've covered the basics: navigation, preset structure, blocks, and how Helix Stadium is organized internally. Now, it's time to put all of that into practice. In this episode, we're finally building your first real guitar preset from scratch. Step by step, no shortcuts, no magic tricks. Along the way, I'll explain the most important concepts you need to understand when creating tones in the Helix Stadium. Not just what to click, but why we're doing it in this exact order. For the best experience watching this episode, I recommend using headphones. You'll be able to hear the subtle differences as we add each block and hear how they all come together step by step to create the final sound. As we go through this, I encourage you to follow along on your own Stadium and click through the menus with me in real time. There's also a desktop app available that lets you edit Stadium presets wirelessly over Wi-Fi, which can be a big convenience for many users, especially if you prefer working on a larger screen and in more comfortable positions. The app can be downloaded directly from official Line 6 website. I'll include the link in the description. Let's move on and start building our first preset together. Helix Stadium really simplifies this process, especially for beginners. But the fundamentals stay the same. The interaction between the amp's character, the cabinet, and the microphone choice define most of the sound coming out from the Helix Stadium and is the foundation for further processing with effects. For this example, let's aim for a dynamic, playable rock tone. Something expressive, not overgained, definitely not a metal tone. I'll start by adding an amp, for example Brit 2203 MV, which is modeled after Marshall JCM 800. If you want to see the full list of available amps, you can find it on the Line 6 website. Maybe there's an amp you've always dreamt of playing, and you'll be able to dial in this tone on Stadium. I'll include the link in the description. Please also note that the amps at the top of the list, down to the subtle gray line, are the new Agora amps. One of the key features that sets Stadium apart from older Helix units. These are Line 6's latest amp models, different from the Ajax and Legacy models you might know from older Helix devices. The collection currently includes several models and will continue to expand with future updates. They are worth keeping an eye on. They feel exceptionally good to play. Now watch what happens when I add the amp. Stadium automatically assigns a matching cabinet. You can disable this behavior, but if you're just starting out, this is actually a great feature. Until you develop your own preferences for specific cabs, microphones, or impulse responses, Helix gives you a solid default. chosen by line 6 to work well with that amp. At this stage, it's a good idea to ask yourself one simple question. Am I even close to the sound I want? It's simple, just strum some chords and judge if the sound you hear is the sound you want. Sometimes it's better to switch to another amp or cab before touching any knobs. Once we've chosen our amp and cab, Helix Stadium introduces a very powerful feature – Focus View. By tapping the Focus View button at the top left of the inspector, we enter Focus View. Here, amp parameters are mapped to different areas of the screen, the center and the corners, allowing you to quickly audition several prepared tonal variations. This lets you find a strong starting point without needing to understand things like sag, bias or ripple right away. The same applies to the cabinet. Instead of turning knobs, you can visually move the microphone position directly on the touchscreen. Focus View dramatically shortens the time needed to get a usable sound. Once we're happy with the general direction, let's go back to the amp settings and focus on the gain. The exact values don't matter. What matters is how it feels to play. One person may like gain at 6, another at 8. There is no right or wrong here. But it's important to understand that gain dramatically affects not just the sonic character, but also how the amp responds to your playing. It changes the feel, the dynamics, the way notes compress and sustain. Lower gain settings tend to be more touch-sensitive and dynamic, while higher gain can offer more sustain and aggression. This is something you need to dial in for yourself, based on your playing style and the sound you're chasing. And by the way, the order in which I'm doing this matters. Doing things in this way simply minimizes unnecessary tweaking. Next, let's talk about the hype knob, a brand new feature in Stadium. At 0, the amp behaves closer to its original character. Turning it up moves the sound toward a more processed, studio-ready tone. Think of it as a fast way to make your tone sit better in a mix. Now, let's clean things up a bit. On the cabinet block, we'll set a low cut to remove unnecessary sub-bass. It needs to sound good on your playback system. Then the high cut. Electric guitar generates a lot of harsh hiss in the higher frequencies. A good method here is to slightly overdo it, listen carefully, then pull back to find the sweet spot. Now we return to the amp and adjust the main EQ controls: bass, mid, treble and presence. Treble will be the most obvious. It affects your tone brightness and peak attack. Listen closely to the changes. You can later fine-tune the EQ on a separate EQ block. Let's throw one in. You can tweak the knobs, but it's way easier to use the focus view here. It's much easier to visually understand what's happening when you see a graphical representation of the frequency balance, instead of guessing based on numbers. This way, you can quickly spot where your sound is too boomy, too thin, or too harsh, and make broad musical adjustments without overthinking it. But let's go back to the amp settings just for a second. There are also more advanced parameters like sag, ripple or Z pre-post. We will skip an in-depth explanation of these parameters because it's a beginner series. But remember, the great thing is that Helix Stadium now provides descriptions for every parameter in the top section of the screen, so we can read it while tweaking. Let's add a boost pedal before the amp. This is a good moment to show the model search feature in the model list. It works for amps, cabs and effects. You can type either the line 6 name or the name of the original pedal it's based on. Helix will instantly find it. So let's say we want to find an Ibanez TS808 tube screamer. It doesn't matter if I write Ibanez or TS808, it instantly finds what I was looking for. After dialing it in, you might notice some pickup noise, depending on your pickups. No problem. Let's enable the noise gate at the input block. Tap the input block at the start of your signal chain, then set the threshold while listening to the noise and stop once it disappears. Now let's add a delay. Effects are clearly marked as mono or stereo. You already know this from episode 3, that mono blocks collapse stereo. Now you're seeing why that matters in routing. Mono means that both your left and right channels play exactly the same thing, so you'll hear it in the center. It's great if you've got a mono sound system, for example, you play via single guitar speaker. With stereo, the output in left and right channels differ. For example, if you play on in-ear monitors or headphones and throw in a stereo ping-pong delay, you'll be able to hear distinct repeats in your left and right ear. That's why it's important to remember that placing a mono block after a stereo block will collapse the signal back to mono. For this mono delay, I'll simply adjust the low and high cut to make the repeats sound narrower, almost like coming from a phone. This way, the delay's repeats won't fight as much with the dry signal. And now, let's set the mix level for the final effect amount adjustment. The last thing we do is save our preset in the user preset bank. We simply press the floppy disk icon, the save button, then save as new, choose a name and click done. By the way, there are several ways to save presets for different situations. Save overrides the current preset. Save as new creates a new preset in the next available slot in the user presets folder. Override lets you choose which existing presets to replace. And Save Template saves your current signal chain as a template for future use. And that's it! You've just built your first preset from scratch. I've tweaked this preset a bit behind the scenes and made it available to download from noiseharmony.com for free, so go ahead and grab it. But before we wrap up, I want to stress one important thing. In sound design, there are no hard rules. The best tones often come from breaking conventions, pushing blocks beyond their intended use, and experimenting with ideas that look wrong on paper. That said, understanding the theory and fundamentals we talked about today gives you framework, and once you know the rules, you can break them with intention. In this episode, we'll take this one step further and talk about snapshots. We'll create a couple of snapshots for the preset we've created today, and you'll learn exactly how to set them up properly. This is episode 5 of our Helix Stadium beginner series. If you're new here, my name is Rafał. I'm a professional sound designer, and for a long time I've been creating guitar tones and presets for Line 6 gear. You can find and hear my work on noiseharmony.com. In the previous episode, we built a complete guitar preset from scratch. We focused on amps, cabs, and effects. And by the end, we had a nice dynamic tone. Go ahead and grab it from noiseharmony.com if you liked it. So far, we've been thinking mostly in terms of adding new blocks, like amps, cabs, or effects, to shape our sound. That's useful, but it's quite limiting. Sometimes you want to change how the entire preset behaves while playing. Drastically different amp settings, different distortion and compression settings, different output balance, different sounds for different parts of your song. That's exactly what snapshots are for. Snapshots are one of the most powerful features in Line 6 devices, and once you understand them, they completely change how you build and play presets. Let's break it down from the ground up. A snapshot is a stored state of a preset. It remembers which blocks are on or off, and it remembers the values of selected parameters at specific moment in time. When you switch snapshots, Helix Stadium recalls those states instantly, and this is the most important thing to understand. Snapshots do not load a new preset. You stay inside the same preset the entire time. And this is actually their greatest advantage, because staying inside the same preset means there is no audio gap between changes. Unlike switching between presets, where a brief silence can occur during the transition, snapshots switch instantly and seamlessly. Think of snapshots as different scenes of the same rig. Snapshots can change bypass states of blocks. They can also change parameter values inside blocks, as long as those parameters are snapshot enabled. For example, one snapshot can have a delay mix at 0% and another can have it at 25%. One snapshot can have lower amp gain and another slightly higher. One snapshot can have a darker cab high cut and another a bit more open. What snapshots cannot do is change the structure of the preset. You can't add, move, or remove blocks, and you can't change the routing. The architecture stays the same. When you want a parameter to change between snapshots, you explicitly tell Stadium that this parameter should be snapshot controlled. You can do that by either pressing and turning one of the parameter knobs, or by selecting a parameter, and on the Side tab, you can make it snapshot controlled. If you want to control block's bypass state with snapshots, simply press on the selected block and then select Snapshots Set Bypass. Once enabled, that parameter value can be different in each snapshot, while all other parameters remain shared across all snapshots. And in Helix Stadium, you've got 8 snapshot slots available. This gives you very fine control. You decide exactly what changes and what stays consistent. A good habit is to be selective. Only snapshot enable parameters that actually need to change. Let's take a very common scenario and apply it to the preset created in the previous episode. Snapshot 1 is your rhythm sound. Lower gain, delay off, and amp level balanced for the band mix. Snapshot 2 is your lead sound. Slightly higher gain, delay on, and a small amp level boost to help the guitar step forward. Both snapshots use the same blocks. Nothing new is added. Nothing is removed. Only states and values change. One of the biggest advantages of snapshots is how they behave live. Switching snapshots is instantaneous and silent. There are no audio gaps and no tails getting cut off. Delays and reverbs continue naturally as long as you enable the trails on them. This makes snapshots ideal for tight musical transitions. You can switch sounds exactly on the beat without worrying about artifacts. Helix Stadium allows you to name snapshots and arrange them in a logical order. There is also a handy swap snapshots function. From Snapshot FOOTSWITCH mode, hold the 2 FOOTSWITCHES you'd like to swap, and their positions will be exchanged. Logical snapshot naming and order matters more than it seems. Clear snapshot names reduce mental load during performance. The most common beginner mistake with snapshots is overusing them. Not every small change needs a snapshot. If you find yourself creating snapshots for tiny variations, your preset may be trying to do too much. Sometimes the best and most natural way to change your sound is to slightly turn the volume knob on your guitar, or to change the pickup from bridge to neck. Focus on controlling your playing dynamics and picking technique. Certain parts are intended to be played lightly. Ultimately, your hands are the key to the sound. Another common mistake is forgetting to save after making snapshot changes. Remember, snapshot edits are still preset edits. If you don't save the changes, they're gone. One more thing. You can enable discard edits for snapshots right here. With discard edits enabled, the snapshots will forget changed parameter values and bypass states when you switch between snapshots. This may be the desired behavior, for example when using wah pedal. You can turn it on during your solo part on your lead snapshot and then switch your snapshots for the next part of the song. Now, if you decide to come back to your lead snapshot, it will have the wah pedal disabled. Once you get comfortable with snapshots, you'll notice something interesting. You start designing presets differently from the start. Now you'll be thinking, okay, for this song I need one preset with 3 snapshots. One for the intro, one for verses, and one for choruses and outro. This leads to faster setup and much smoother performances. And that's it for episode 5. You now understand what snapshots really are and how they differ from presets. and how to use them to create multiple playable sounds inside a single preset. This is one of the most important concepts in the Helix ecosystem, and mastering it will dramatically improve how you play and design your tones. In the next episode, we'll move into routing. We'll talk about paths, splits, merges, and how to start thinking in stereo and parallel processing without making things unnecessarily complicated. If you want to continue with the series, make sure you're subscribed, so you don't miss episode 6. And if you're looking for Helix presets that already make extensive musical use of snapshots, you can find them on noiseharmony.com. This is episode 6 of our Helix Stadium beginner series. If you're new here, my name is Rafa. I'm a professional sound designer, and for a long time I've been creating guitar tones and presets for Line 6 gear. You can find and hear my work on noiseharmony.com. Fully built, mix-ready presets designed for real playing situations. In the previous episode, we talked about snapshots and how to turn a single preset into multiple playable sounds. We focused on behavior, transitions, and performance. How a preset reacts when you move through a song. Today, we're shifting perspective. The preset we've built in episodes 4 and 5 lived on a single straight signal path, left to right, one block after another. That's perfectly fine and has great educational value. But Helix Stadium can do so much more than that. In this episode, we'll talk about routing, which essentially means managing the flow of your audio signal through different processing paths, using splits and merges. I'll show you how to think about this conceptually without turning this into an advanced lecture. The goal here is understanding what's possible, when it makes sense, and when it absolutely does not. Let's start with the idea of paths. In Helix Stadium, a path is a lane your signal travels through. Helix Stadium has two main processing lines, Path 1 and Path 2, and each of them can be divided into subpaths, A and B. This gives you a total of 4 subpaths, 1A, 1B, 2A, and 2B. But it's important to understand that these are not 4 independent processing paths. The processing power is shared between the 2 main paths, not split across all 4 subpaths separately. When you're adding blocks, you can create a subpath simply by dragging a block down below the main lane. You've already been using paths, even if you didn't think about them explicitly. Every preset is essentially a signal path that takes your signal from input to output. What Helix Stadium gives you is the ability to create multiple paths that can run in parallel, handle different parts of your sound, and then come back together. Let's focus on the input block for a moment. When you select an empty input block, it lets you choose the input for the processing path. In Helix Stadium, you've got 4 available paths, so you can really use multiple instruments with it if you want. I'll show you something. There's a factory template called guitar bass plus vox plus keys. Let's take a look at it. How does it work? Each signal path has a different input. If you plug your instruments to Stadium according to these inputs, you can process your instruments and vocals through all 4 paths. Let's jump into the matrix, where you can quickly create your output mix. Just expand the view by pressing the plus sign. Here you can quickly change the balance between paths or change the panoramas. Now let me show you how to create additional processing paths. You need to add a split block. Please note that split and merge blocks are always available above your amps and effects, when you're on an empty slot. To create an additional processing path, you simply drag the split node over here. But let's get back to the split node for a moment. A split is exactly what it sounds like. It takes your signal and sends it down 2 different paths at the same time. After the split, these are called Path A and Path B. By default, Helix Stadium adds a Y split. This split sends the signal evenly to both Path A and Path B. Within the Y split block, you can adjust the stereo balance of the signal between the 2 paths. Let's add a reverb on one of the paths and set the mix to 100%. Can you still hear the signal without the reverb? It's because it's traveling through the other parallel signal path unaffected and merges with the reverberated signal. There are 3 other split types available. The A-B split lets you distribute signal between path A and path B however you like, evenly or entirely to one path if needed. The crossover split divides the signal at a chosen frequency, which is especially useful for bass guitar, where you might want to process the low and high frequencies differently. And finally, there's the dynamic split, which routes the signal based on a threshold level, allowing louder and softer playing to be processed in different ways. A merge is where those parts come back together. The merge block is always the same. It's essentially a mixer, where you can control the level, panning, and polarity of the signals coming from both paths. Check it out on our parallel reverb example. I can mix the effect in using the merge block. Between the split and the merge, each path can have completely different blocks, effects, and processing. Okay, this is the foundation of routing. Instead of stacking everything in series, you can let different versions of your sound coexist and work together. Parallel routing is not there to make things complicated. It exists to solve problems. For example, you might want a clean, articulate dry signal and a big, washed-out ambient signal at the same time. If you put everything in series, the ambience will smear your entire sound. With a split, you can keep one path dry and focused, and let the other path handle delays and reverbs. Both versions play together, but they don't fight each other. You can also build very advanced stereo chains thanks to these extended routing possibilities. Parallel routing is one way to use multiple paths, but it's not the only option. Another approach is linking paths in series, so one feeds directly into the next. At the end of each path, in the output block, you can choose to link paths in series, allowing you to create much longer processing chains and avoiding DSP overload. Look at this. When I choose path 2A for the output, the arrows indicating signal flow appear. This means that these two paths are now connected in series. The signal will be processed by the top path first and by the bottom path next. Understanding this simple connection method helps you build flexible presets without unnecessary complexity while saving the unit's processing power at the same time. Don't be afraid to experiment with all the routing methods. Splits, merges, parallel paths, and series linking. Exploring these options is one of the best ways to understand how Helix Stadium can shape your tone and respond to your playing. At the same time, remember that routing requires a bit of attention. With multiple paths, it's easy to get lost and lose track of what's really happening to your signal. If you start feeling confused, just go back to a simpler layout and rebuild from there. Treat routing as a creative tool. Use it to discover new sounds. But keep an eye on your levels and the overall signal flow, so you stay in control of your sound. Once you understand splits and merges, you'll start seeing presets differently. Instead of asking, what effects should I add next, you'll start asking, does this belong in the same path or should it live on its own? That single question often leads to cleaner, more professional sounding presets. At this point, you don't need to build complex multi-path monsters. The goal of this episode is awareness. You now know that routing exists, how splits and merges work, and why parallel processing can be useful. The skills come with experimentation. That's it for episode 6. You now have all the tools you need to create advanced routing setups. You understand the possibilities Helix Stadium offers, and this will help you use them creatively and intentionally in your presets. In the next episode, we'll move into the song view and the showcase automation engine. I'll show you how to work with backing tracks, markers, and performance tools so you can turn your preset into a complete song-ready setups. If you want to keep following the series, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss episode 7. This is episode 7 of our Helix Stadium Beginner series. If you're new here, my name is Rafał. I'm a professional sound designer, and for a long time I've been creating guitar tones and presets for Line 6 gear. You can find and hear my work on noiseharmony.com. Fully built, mix-ready presets designed for real playing situations. Up to this point, we've been working at a preset level. We've built tones, used snapshots, and explored routing. That's the traditional way to think about a multi-effects unit. You play, you tap, you switch, and you hope your feet do the right thing at the right moment. But real geeks have a way of testing that. You're mid-set, you're moving, you're reacting, and one wrong press can throw you into the wrong bank or the wrong preset at the worst possible time. In real musical situations, you want to focus on delivering the best possible performance, expressing emotions, and staying fully present in the song, not on pressing buttons or wondering whether you're on the right snapshot. You think about feel, dynamics, and musical intent, and you need your rig to take care of the technical side so it never distracts you from playing. That's exactly what the new Showcase system is built for. Showcase turns Helix Stadium into your personal technician. It can switch snapshots, change presets, control external MIDI gear, and automate effect parameters, all tied directly to the structure of your song. In this episode, we'll focus on the song view. I'll show you how to set up a song, how backing tracks and click fit into the workflow, and why Showcase is much more than a backing track player. It's the timing brain that can keep your entire performance in sync. This is one of the biggest conceptual shifts in Helix Stadium. So let's take it step by step. But I need to start with a quick disclaimer. Showcase is still evolving at the time of making this video. I'm currently on firmware 1.3.2. Showcase Phase 1 was introduced back in version 1.2, and the engine is still being expanded with future phases. This series was originally planned for a total of 10 episodes, and once Showcase reaches its final form, I'll record an additional update video. You'll find the link in the description and in the corner of this screen. Okay, let's jump in. By pressing the button with the note icon on the right, we can access the song view. Song view is a performance-oriented view that organizes everything related to songs in one place. A song can reference presets, snapshots, tempo information, and automation data without duplicating or modifying the presets themselves. You're not creating new sounds or songs here. You're defining how existing sounds are used over time, all powered by the Showcase automation engine. Think of song view as a container for musical intent. Verse, chorus, bridge, solo, outro. All of these can be represented as sections inside a song. Instead of jumping between presets manually, you move through a song structure and the automation engine takes care of all tone changes in real time. Let me show you how to navigate this view. In the top right corner of the screen, you'll see two icons. The first one opens the flag list, where you can easily manage all your flags. Flags are events that take place at a certain time during song playback. They happen automatically. The second icon, officially called the Song Setting button, opens the panel where you can reorder tracks and trim the levels of recordings that are too loud. For proper balancing, the best place to work is the matrix view. From there you can expand the song, see all the tracks at once, adjust levels and panning, mute tracks you don't want to hear, or solo something like the drums to practice playing super tight. Let's go back to the song view. You can use gestures to zoom in and out on the timeline, and if you tap directly on the timeline, you can choose an exact position. If you want to add a flag, tap the Add Flag button at the bottom of the screen, then drag the desired flag type to your timeline location. You can move flags either by dragging them or by setting an exact bar and beat position. To rename a flag, simply tap the pencil icon next to its name. To select and edit existing flags, you can either tap the vertical markers on the timeline or open the flag list and choose the one you want. That will automatically bring it into focus. There's also the chase button, sometimes referred to as a screen follow, which makes the display follow the playhead as the song plays. It's especially useful when working with longer arrangements. Now, let's take a closer look at the flags themselves. You have several different types available. Markers are a great way to define song sections and quickly jump between them using Footswitches. Cycles let you loop a specific section of your song, for example a solo part you want to practice. You can repeat it as many times as you like, and when you're done, simply hit the cycle foot switch to exit the loop and continue with the next section of the song. You can also use flags to trigger preset and snapshot changes. Just select the exact preset and snapshot you want from the list. There are also flags for enabling the looper, using utility functions like turning the metronome on for a section without drums, switching channels on an external amp, sending MIDI commands, triggering hotkey combinations, and even changing the time signature or tempo of the song. I won't go into detail on each of these in this video, but the important thing is understanding what's possible here and how powerful this system can be. Now, let me show you how to use Showcase in practice. Let's start with the simplest use case: click tracks. With Showcase, you can create a dedicated click track that follows the structure of your song, tempo changes, section lengths, and transitions. I'm assuming here that you don't have a fully produced song ready to upload into Helix Stadium, and that all you really need is a simple click track for practice. The easiest way to create a click track from scratch is to start with an empty song. You can create it with the Helix Stadium desktop app. Go to the top right menu, and here, if you just skip adding WAV files, you will actually create an empty song inside your Helix Stadium. As you can see, the song already contains a start flag, which defines the tempo and time signature. If you move to the second page of that flag, you can even choose a preset that automatically loads when the song starts playing. By moving the end flag, you control the overall length of the song. And if your click track needs tempo or time signature changes, you can add a time flag. Just press Add Flag, go to the second page, and set the new tempo or time signature. For example, changing the tempo to 100 BPM at a specific bar. Now let's go to the transport view. Press and hold the top right foot switch, select transport, turn on the metronome, and hit play. It's not the most sophisticated approach, but it's incredibly effective. This lets you practice with a metronome, create tempo and time signature changes from your songs, and then build on that by adding markers, cycles, snapshot changes, or tempo sync MIDI commands for external gear. You can even sync the session with the other band members over MIDI, and let Showcase run your entire set, potentially replacing a laptop altogether. Now let's talk about backing tracks. Showcase is an incredible practice environment. You can load your backing tracks as stems and play along. You can do that with the Helix Stadium desktop app. If you don't have it yet, make sure to download it from the official Line 6 website. You'll find the link in the description. Go to the top right menu, set the BPM and a name for your song, drop the WAV files and just hit the transfer button. Now you can place musical flags on the timeline and make your tone changes perfectly tailored to the structure of your song. Light lead for this phrase? A breakdown with a raw riff tone here? Maybe a massive metal lead with a beautiful delay when the solo arrives? You decide exactly where each version of your sound lives. You can even take your favorite song, remove the guitar, and play the parts of a guitarist you admire. How? We now have some incredibly powerful tools for that. Simply drop the song into a stem splitter. a tool that separates a mixed audio file into individual tracks, like vocals, drums, bass and guitar. If you've never used a DAW, which stands for Digital Audio Workstation, think of it as taking a finished song and breaking it apart into its individual ingredients. I'm using the one built into Logic Pro here. If you're looking for alternatives, tools like Lala AI or Moses AI offer similar functionality. Both platforms allow you to use their audio stem separation features for free to a limited extent. A built-in version of Stem Splitter will also be coming to Showcase in future software updates. Once the song is separated, transfer the stems into Helix Stadium. Keep in mind a few technical limitations. The maximum playback length is 13 minutes. The sample rate must be 44.1, 48, 88.2 or 96 kHz. The bit depth should be 16, 24 or 32 bit. And in the current version, you can use up to 8 audio files per song. When the transfer is finished, all that's left is creating your tones and setting up flags with snapshot changes and you're ready to play. And if something doesn't sit right, for example if the synth layers are too loud, you can just turn the track down and keep going. Of course, Stadium has Bluetooth, so you can simply stream a backing track or a song and play along. Nothing wrong with that. But the moment you prepare everything inside Showcase, with tempo sync delays, favorite song sections with prepared loops, clear markers for navigation and automated transitions, it becomes a real level up compared to practicing with random YouTube play-alongs. When you already have songs prepared, a finished production and dialed-in tones, Showcase can become the real command center of your rig. Imagine, you're a singing guitarist, a solo artist on stage. Showcase can play full backing tracks or individual stems alongside your performance. Synth layers, additional guitars, sound effects, or any other elements that are part of the production but not performed live, all while switching your guitar presets in perfect sync with a song. At the same time, it can adjust vocal effects exactly when sections change, trigger lighting cues over MIDI, and send commands to your laptop so projected visuals evolve at the key musical moments. Instead of juggling multiple devices and hoping everything stays aligned, you're working with a single system that follows the timeline and manages the entire performance. This opens up a whole new level of possibilities and lets you present your music in a complete professional show, not just a collection of individual songs. And that's it for episode 7. You now understand what Showcase is and why it's much more than just a backing track player. You've seen how it can function as a click track engine, a backing track system, and the central brain of an entire gig, all inside Helix Stadium. In the next episode of this series, we'll get into FOOTSWITCH assignments. I'll explain what really makes Helix Stadium so powerful and how you can harness this power to create an ultimate gig machine. If you want to continue with this series, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss episode 9. And if you're looking for Helix presets designed with real-life workflows in mind, including snapshot layouts and performance-ready structures, you can find them on noiseharmony.com. This is episode 8 of our Helix Stadium beginner series. If you're new here, my name is Rafał. I'm a professional sound designer and for a long time I've been creating guitar tones and presets for Line 6 gear. You can find and hear my work on noiseharmony.com. In the previous episode, we looked at how Helix Stadium lets you think in songs instead of presets, how Showcase can be used both as a click track engine and a backing track player, and how automations can support your performance. Today is all about FOOTSWITCHES and bypass assignments. I'll show you how to control sound with your feet while playing. We'll learn about different modes available in Stadium: STOMP mode, Snapshot mode, and more. This is where Helix Stadium stops feeling like a device and starts behaving like an instrument, an extension of your musical expression. Let's get into it. A great tone that you can't control easily is not a great tone. In real playing situations, you need to make changes quickly and reliably. You need to turn effects on and off, change levels, bring in delays for leads, clean things up for verses, and do all of that without thinking about the device. Helix Stadium gives you a very flexible system, but flexibility only helps if you understand the logic behind it. So before we touch any switches, let's clarify one thing. In Helix Stadium, FOOTSWITCHES can have many functions and you can fully customize them. They can switch presets and snapshots, they can control block states and parameter values that are assigned to them. And they can also invoke commands that control both the stadium and your external rig. But let's start with our basics, the STOMP mode. So the top right foot switch is responsible for toggling between two different modes. By default, this foot switch toggles between STOMP A and presets. But you can change these modes in global settings. I'll explain it later in this series. For the sake of explanation, I've set it to STOMP A and STOMP B. So both Helix Stadium and Helix Stadium XL have 12 physical foot switches. 2 of them are fixed, FS6 switches modes, and FS12 is tap tuner. That leaves 10 foot switches available for effect control. STOMP A and STOMP B are 2 independent banks of assignments for those same 10 physical switches. Press FS6 to toggle between them. For example, in STOMP A, FS2 might control your delay, while in STOMP B, FS2 controls your reverb. Same physical switch, different function per mode. This gives you 10 physical switches times 2 modes, so 20 programmable effect assignments per preset as a baseline. And as we'll see in a moment, you can actually go further than that by merging multiple effects into a single switch. Okay, we are now in STOMP mode. Look, when I press the foot switches, they turn the corresponding effects on and off. This is because they are assigned to their bypass states. When an effect is on or off, that's called its bypass state. Newly added effects will be automatically assigned as new STOMP items with bypass control. I'll add an effect. See how it was automatically assigned? You can turn off this behavior in the settings, but let's carry on for now. But first, one crucial thing. Stadium's foot switches are capacitive touch sensitive. This means there are 2 ways to interact with them. A light touch without pressing selects the block and opens its parameters on screen, while a full press activates or bypasses the effect. This is a game changer for fast editing. If you just touch the foot switch, you will simply select the assigned effect block without changing its bypass state. This lets you easily control and edit every assigned block. You can also choose to assign multiple effects to a single foot switch. Just press a block, assign to switch. Here, if you choose replace, it will replace assignment. So just leave it as is. Now we press the foot switch that we want to merge with, and voila! We have a foot switch that controls 2 bypass states. This means a single foot switch can turn one block on, several blocks on, or turn some blocks on while turning others off. STOMP mode is a super convenient way of controlling the states of switches. In STOMP mode, you can assign the foot switches to control the channels in your amp. Look at this. After I've selected the channel parameter, I can press Learn Controller, press a foot switch to assign it to, and now I have an amp channel switch under my foot switch. Or I can give myself a little volume boost on the output block. Just choose the level parameter, press Learn Controller, assign the foot switch, and lastly we have to precisely set values for the on and off states of the foot switch. You can also do it in a different way. Go to the main menu, bypass control. Now you can select a specific block and define exactly what a STOMP assignment should control. For example, I select the gain parameter, choose the controller type, and then decide what will it control. A foot switch, an expression pedal, or an external controller. Let's assign it to EXP1. Now, I simply set the minimum and maximum values. One thing worth knowing. On Helix Stadium XL, the built-in expression pedal can function as both EXP1 and EXP2. Push it all the way forward to toggle between them using the toe switch. And that's it. The expression pedal now controls the gain of the distortion in real time. The idea that you can assign everything as you please is crucial to understand the world of possibilities the Stadium gives you. Because later, in episode 9 of this series, I'll show you how to supercharge the STOMP mode using the command center. Foot switches can behave in different ways. Most of the time, you'll use toggle behavior. Press once, something turns on. Press again, it turns off. But sometimes momentary behavior makes more sense. For example, a temporary delay swell, feedback effect, or a pitch effect that only happens while you hold the switch down. The feedbacker is a good example of an effect that should be controlled this way. Let's add it to our effect chain. Now, if I touch and hold the automatically assigned foot switch, I can choose the momentary type. Now this effect is only on when I press and hold the foot switch, and it turns off once I release it. Helix Stadium has a couple different modes that you can toggle between with the FOOTSWITCH FS6. You can set them up in the global settings. Let's see. We open the settings menu, global settings. Now we choose switches and pedals, and look over here, FS6 mode 1 and FS6 mode 2. Look, what we have selected here determines which modes we're switching between. So we can choose between stomps A and B, preset, snapshot, transport and combo. We can also access other modes by long pressing the FS6 foot switch. Today, we discussed the STOMP mode that lets you toggle multiple bypass states and parameter changes within a single preset. Preset mode is used to switch between different presets. Snapshot mode lets you move between different snapshots inside the same preset. We've covered snapshots in episode 5 of this series. Combo mode allows you to combine these approaches, depending on how you want to work. And finally, foot switches can also be used for transport control, which is used with the showcase system to navigate your backing track. And that's it for episode 8. You now know how to assign foot switches, control bypass states, and use expression pedals. Now you can take your preset from something that sounds good to something that's actually playable in changing context. In the next episode, we'll stay at the performance level but shift focus slightly. We'll talk about command center and how to trigger actions, control external gear, and design a workflow that feels simple even when the setup is complex. This is episode 9 of our Helix Stadium beginner series. If you're new here, my name is Rafał. I'm a professional sound designer and for a long time I've been creating guitar tones and presets for Line 6 gear. You can find and hear my work on noiseharmony.com. Fully built, mix-ready presets designed for real playing situations. In the previous episode, we took a look at foot switches, talked about bypass states, expression pedals, and the possibilities that come with the STOMP assignments. Today, we're staying at the same performance level, but shifting focus. In this episode, we'll look at the command center. I'll explain what command center actually is, what kinds of commands it can trigger, and what possibilities it opens for you as an artist. This is the layer where Helix Stadium stops being just a modeler and becomes the central controller for your entire rig. Hopefully these examples give you a solid idea of how to use command center to your advantage. With custom commands, you can supercharge STOMP mode and avoid switching between different views. Use instant commands to trigger actions on preset or snapshot recall and assign MIDI control to X, Y, expression pedals, or external controllers. Command center is the place where you define commands. A command can be something internal, like switching a snapshot, queuing a song, or recording a loop. It can also be something external, like sending MIDI messages to other gear. To open the command center, simply select it from the main menu. Depending on whether you're using Helix Stadium or Helix Stadium XL, this screen may look slightly different, but I'll focus on the core concepts and possibilities here. The way you apply them will be very similar on both units. Before diving into specific commands, let's talk about what's possible. For Stomp A and Stomp B, you can assign up to 2 commands per footswitch. These work alongside your bypass assignments and are set per preset, meaning every preset can have its own unique command center configuration. This is what really lets you supercharge the Stomp mode. For the XY controller, which uses X-axis and Y-axis to control 2 parameters simultaneously on screen, similar to how an XY pad works in a synthesizer or DAW, as well as the expression pedal, you can assign MIDI commands only. On the left side of the screen, you will see a sidebar with instant commands. You can define up to 16 of these, and they are triggered automatically when a preset is loaded. Important note: instant commands support all command types except preset snapshot changes and utility commands. If you need those, assign them to Stomp A or B switches instead. If snapshot control is enabled, instant commands can also be recalled per snapshot. On the right side of the screen, you'll find your external controllers, where you can assign commands to connected hardware. Now let's look at the command types themselves. For every command, you first decide how it is triggered. On footswitch, press Release, holding the switch, or as a toggle between 2 values. There's also triggers, which are perfect for controlling drum samples or triggering specific sounds. The first command type is preset snapshot change. This one is incredibly powerful. A simple use case would be switching to the next preset directly from Stomp mode, or making your favorite snapshot available on stomps without switching to snapshot or combo mode. Let's set up 2 snapshots quickly. Select the footswitch, choose snapshot, and pick the snapshot number. Now, you can switch snapshots directly in the Stomp mode, a great way to tailor Stomp mode exactly to your needs. Next is the Song command, which lets you control navigation and transport inside Showcase. For example, imagine if you're using a backtrack that always starts with a clean intro. You could pair a clean snapshot change with a return to 0 song command. So every time you select that snapshot, the song restarts. This saves time and avoids jumping between Stomp mode and the transport menu. Then we have looper commands. The idea is the same. Instead of switching to the looper view, you bring only the controls you actually need into the Stomp mode. The utility command gives you access to simple but useful functions. Save performs a quick save, instantly overwriting your current preset. Mute all mutes all audio outputs, which is great for emergencies or breaks. And Stopwatch lets you press to start stop or press and hold to reset to 0. On Helix Stadium XL, the toe switch, that's the switch hidden in the onboard expression pedal that you activate by pressing the pedal fully forward, can also be used as a command source. It supports all command types and can have up to 2 commands assigned, making it a great way to add extra functionality to your expression pedal setup. Next is the external amp command. This allows you to switch channels on a compatible external amplifier. Important warning: send external amp commands only to amplifiers that utilize short-to-sleeve footswitch inputs. Connecting to any other sort of input could cause permanent damage to both your amp and Helix Stadium. A great use case is pairing this with a snapshot change. For example, switching your amp to a clean channel while simultaneously enabling reverbs and delays to create a lush ambient sound. Finally, we have MIDI and hotkey commands. These offer the most creative potential. You can use Helix Stadium to control lighting, external MIDI gear like drum machines or synths, or even your laptop. The possibilities here are endless. Let me show you an example of what you can do when you have a nice synth playing around. I've assigned MIDI notes to footswitches using the command center, and now I can play synth bass with my feet. As for navigation, the turquoise triangle shows you which foot switches already have commands assigned. You can easily copy commands, clear them, and customize labels and colors to keep everything visually organized. That's it for episode 9. You now understand what Command Center is, how it fits into the Helix Stadium ecosystem, and how it can customize and supercharge the STOMP mode, and help you control your entire rig. In the next and final episode of this beginner series, we'll step away from performance and take care of the fundamentals that keep everything running smoothly. We'll talk about global settings, USB audio, and maintenance. Together we'll go through the most important settings and core concepts. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the final episode. Welcome to the final episode of our Helix Stadium beginner series. If you're new here, my name is Rafał. I'm a professional sound designer, and for a long time I've been creating guitar tones and presets for Line 6 gear. You can find and hear my work on noiseharmony.com. Fully built, mix-ready presets designed for real playing situations. If you've been following this series from the beginning, you already know how to build presets, control them with Footswitches and Snapshots, set up routing with splits and merges, and even think at the song and performance level using Showcase and Command Center. At this point, you're well equipped to make music with Helix Stadium, and after following this series, you now have a much deeper understanding of what this thing can do. But there are some things left to be discussed. Today is all about global settings, USB audio, and basic maintenance. These are not creative features, but they determine whether your setup is stable, predictable, and reliable across rehearsals, gigs, and studio sessions. Let's start with global settings. Global settings are not part of your presets, but can affect your sound. They sit above everything else and affect how Helix Stadium behaves. I'll go through the settings that in my opinion are the most important to keep in mind, without going into too much detail. The goal here is simply to give you an overview of what can be adjusted in this section. So when the time comes and you actually need one of these settings, you'll know it exists and where to find it. And if you're ever unsure what a specific parameter does, you can just select it and read its description at the top of the screen. Let's start with the ins and outs section. Starting from the left, right at the beginning, we have some important settings. The pad controls for the instrument inputs. On Stadium XL, there are two of them, Instrument 1 and Instrument 2. On the base Stadium, there's just one. It's worth checking this if you feel your guitar doesn't sound quite right. Pad settings let you attenuate the input signal, so if you're using a guitar with high output pickups, enabling the pad can help prevent overdriving the input and improve overall tone and headroom. Next, we have mic in, phantom and gain. These settings are important if you're using Helix Stadium with a microphone. Some microphones require phantom power to operate, and this is where you can enable it and adjust the mic gain. Important safety note: never plug or unplug a microphone while phantom power is on. This can potentially damage your equipment. Next are the output settings, which define how Helix Stadium sends audio out to other gear. This is where you match the output level to what you're connecting to: guitar amps, pedals, mixers, studio monitors, or audio interfaces. In most cases, you set this once based on your rig and then leave it alone. Then we have the external gear and routing settings. These come into play when you're using FX loops, external processors, or when you want to bring in audio from another device to jam along or monitor something. You only need to adjust this if you're actually connecting additional hardware. Finally, there are the recording and digital output settings. These are mainly for studio use. Things like USB routing, reamping, and SPD. You'll touch this if you're recording into a DAW, capturing a clean DI signal, or sending audio digitally to another device. If you're just playing live and not recording, you can usually ignore this entire section. The important thing to remember is that most of these settings are not something you tweak all the time. once they're matched to your gear and workflow, they tend to stay the same. Okay, let's move to switches and pedals. The switches and pedals section is all about how you interact with Helix Stadium physically, with foot switches, expression pedals, and any external controllers you connect. For most people, this is not something you need to touch right away, but it becomes very important once you start customizing the unit to match your own workflow. Here you can decide how foot switches behave when you touch or press them, how STOMP, preset, snapshot or combo modes are organized, and how the mode switch itself works. You can also control whether new effects are automatically assigned to foot switches and how the unit behaves when switching presets or snapshots during performance. This section is also where you configure expression pedals, whether their position is remembered globally or per preset, how their polarity works. Polarity determines which direction of the pedal corresponds to the minimum and maximum values. If your pedal seems to work in reverse, this is the setting to check. And how they respond under your foot. If you're using external pedals, foot switches, or other controllers, this is where you tell Helix Stadium what's connected and how it should react. On Stadium XL, this tab goes even further, letting you configure additional control jacks, external switches, expression pedals, and even drum triggers. Most users will never need all of this, but if you're building a more advanced live or studio setup, this is where Helix Stadium really adapts to you, not the other way around. Okay, it's time for displays. The display settings are mostly about brightness, so if your modeler ever tries to blind you in a very dark practice room, this is exactly where you can dial things back and make it more comfortable to use. Next, we've got preferences. This section covers a few general system preferences and convenience features. You can choose how presets are numbered, which mainly matters if you're browsing large preset libraries or using MIDI. There's also an option that controls how delay repeats behave when you tap in a new tempo. Whether you want a more natural, analog-style pitch shift or a cleaner, more transparent result. You'll also find some system-level options here, like automatic time zone detection and remote access to Helix Stadium from the companion app. Most users won't need to touch this right away, but if you start working with MIDI, remote control, or more advanced setups, this is where you will come back to fine-tune how everything behaves. In the songs, you can basically control how songs and markers behave during playback. You can decide whether selecting the next or previous song or marker should happen instantly, or whether it should be queued and only triggered when you press play, or when the current section ends. In practice, this lets you choose between a more immediate hands-on workflow or a safer, performance-friendly approach where changes are prepared in advance. Most users can leave the defaults here, but if you're starting working with backing tracks, setlists, or live playback, these settings become very useful for shaping how Helix Stadium reacts on stage. The tempo and click settings control everything related to timing: the metronome, tempo behavior, and MIDI clock sync. If you're just playing at home, you might barely touch this section, but it becomes very important once you start using backing tracks, delays synced to tempo, or playing live with a band. Here, you can turn the click on or off, decide when it's audible, and choose how it sounds, including the counting before a song starts. You can also decide whether time-based effects like delays and modulation follow the tempo of a song, only follow it during playback, or ignore song tempo entirely. This section also defines where tempo information comes from and how it's stored, whether tempo is saved per snapshot, per preset, or applied globally across the system. Finally, if you're working with the external gear or a DAW, this is where you control MIDI clock, deciding whether Helix Stadium listens to it, sends it out, or ignores it altogether. For most beginners, the defaults here work perfectly fine, but as soon as timing and synchronization become part of your workflow, this is the place you'll come back to. The MIDI section controls how Helix Stadium communicates with other gear and software using MIDI. If you're not using external controllers, DAWs, or MIDI-enabled devices, you can safely leave most of these settings untouched at first. This is where you decide whether MIDI is sent and received over USB or the traditional MIDI ports, how MIDI data is passed through to other devices, and which MIDI channels Helix Stadium uses for different types of control. It also defines how presets and snapshots can be recalled via MIDI, and whether Helix Stadium sends MIDI messages out when you change presets or snapshots. For you, the key takeaway is that MIDI lets Helix Stadium talk to the outside world. You may not need it on day one, but once you start integrating other gear, automating changes, or syncing with a DAW, this section becomes essential. MIDI is actually a fascinating topic that's often underestimated by guitarists. There are so many creative applications waiting to be discovered. It's a river of possibilities that deserves its own deep dive video, which will definitely appear on this channel in the future. The date and time settings are mainly about convenience and display. You can let Helix Stadium automatically set the correct time using Wi-Fi, or you can set it manually if you prefer. This includes choosing your time zone and deciding whether you want a 12-hour or 24-hour clock format. You can also control whether the clock is visible on the screen at all. None of these settings affect your sound or performance, but they can make the interface feel more comfortable and familiar, especially if you're using Helix Stadium regularly. Most users will set this once and never come back to it, unless the clock starts lying to you. Okay, let's move to the global EQ settings, which is one of the most commonly misunderstood tools. Global EQ affects everything coming out of the unit, every preset, every song, every snapshot. This makes it very powerful and very dangerous if misused. Global EQ is not for fixing individual presets. It's for compensating for external factors like a room, a PA system, or monitoring differences between venues. The correct workflow is to dial in your presets so they sound right with global EQ bypassed, and then use global EQ only as a final correction layer when needed. If you do ever need to adjust it, remember that it can be set independently for each output. In fact, there are actually 3 separate global EQs, one for quarter-inch outputs, one for XLR, and one for phones. This means you can EQ your stage monitor, front-of-house send, and in-ear monitors completely independently. In most cases though, it's the best to leave it untouched. Helix Stadium can also act as a USB audio interface when connected to your computer or mobile device, which means you can send and receive audio directly over USB without extra cables. This means you can record directly into a DAW without additional hardware. Your signal, whether it's fully processed with all your Helix effects or a clean unprocessed signal if you prefer to use AMP plugins in your DAW, can be sent digitally, clean and noise-free. With the default settings, audio from your computer like backing tracks or DAW playback will come into Stadium and play through its outputs, letting you jam along with your songs or tracks from apps like YouTube or your DAW. You can also record your guitar or processed Helix tone into your DAW with very low latency by using the USB outputs. And if you want, you can even record both a processed tone and a clean DI signal at the same time for later reamping. Helix Stadium uses multiple USB input and output pairs, and each of them has a specific purpose. USB 1.2 is your main stereo audio path. This is what you'll usually use to record your processed Helix sound into a DAW or to send audio from your computer back to Helix for monitoring. USB 3.4 and 5.6 are additional stereo paths that can be used for more advanced routing, like recording alternate signals, sending audio to different parts of your preset, or separating tracks in a DAW. USB 7 and USB 8 are dedicated to sending clean unprocessed DI signals from Helix to your DAW. And they're actually 2 independent mono outputs, so we can route a different source to each one and capture 2 clean signals at the same time. For example, your guitar on USB 7 and a mic or a second instrument input on USB 8. This is especially useful for reamping later. You choose and manage where these USB signals go in the global settings and output routing inside Helix Stadium. Keeping Helix Stadium up to date is easy and important. Updates often include new features, performance improvements, and bug fixes. There are two ways to do it. The easiest is directly on the unit itself. Open the main menu, Downloads, connect to Wi-Fi or Ethernet, and Stadium will download and install the firmware on its own. The second way is using the Helix Stadium application on your Mac or Windows computer connected over USB. It's a good idea to check for updates regularly, so you're always working with the best and most stable version of the platform. To access the maintenance screen, first power the unit off. Then power it back on while holding the Home and Song buttons at the same time. Keep them pressed for about 10 seconds during startup and Helix Stadium will boot directly into the maintenance menu instead of the normal interface. The maintenance screen in Helix Stadium is where you handle backups, micro SD card management, and resets. Basically anything that helps protect or restore your data. A quick note on micro SD cards. Helix Stadium can utilize a micro SD card with a minimum capacity of 32 GB, HC or XC type, and U1 speed class or higher. From this menu you can create a full backup of all your presets, setlists, settings, and songs to the micro SD card that came with your unit, and later restore that backup if something goes wrong. You can also format a new micro SD card or even perform a full factory reset if you ever need to start from scratch. It's a safe idea to make regular backups, especially before big updates or changes. One final mindset that's worth adopting. When something doesn't behave as expected, don't immediately assume the device is broken. Slow down, check the fundamentals, and work from the outside in. I strongly recommend spending some time with the official manual. I'll leave a link in the description. Also, at the time of recording this video series, there are a few known issues that are actively being addressed by the Line 6 team. So please be patient, and if you do run into something that doesn't seem right, make sure to submit an official support ticket so it can be properly tracked and resolved. And that brings us to the end of the beginner series. You've gone from first contact with Helix Stadium to building presets, controlling them, setting up Footswitches, understanding routing, working with Showcase, Command Center, and finally setting up the system settings. I know this was a lot to take in, and we didn't even dive into every single corner of the UI. But that was never the goal. What matters is that you now know what's possible, where to look when something comes up, and which parts of the system are responsible for which tasks. Even if you don't remember every detail, you'll remember where to look. If you want to go deeper, this channel will continue with more advanced tutorials, creative sound design tips, and unconventional routing ideas. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss anything. And if you're looking for inspiring Helix Stadium presets, you can find them on noiseharmony.com. Thanks for watching, thanks for sticking through the entire series, and I'll see you in the next one.